Zira walked through the forbidden garden on the outskirts of the settlement, her purple skin glistening under the twin moons of planet Eridu. She knew she should not be here so close to the human territory, but something pulled her toward their world, their strange customs, and especially the human man with kind eyes who had saved her during the last meteor storm. The High Council of the Kaldore race had strict rules about interaction with humans. They were considered dangerous, unpredictable, and too emotional. Yet Zira had seen another side to them: courage, compassion, and a strange sense of humor that her own people lacked. A twig snapped behind her, and Zira spun around her heart. Racing faster than normal for her species, her 4 eyes widened when she saw him standing there. John smiled, the expression lighting up his face in a way that fascinated Zira. Humans had such expressive features compared to her kind, whose emotions were shown through subtle color changes in their skin. "Thought I might find you here," he said, his voice low. The council increased patrols after what happened at the trading post. Zira moved closer, her 7-foot-tall frame towering over his. But somehow, she never felt powerful around him. His presence made her feel something else entirely. Something forbidden. "They would execute us both if they knew I was meeting you," she whispered, her vocal cords producing the human language with difficulty after months of secret practice. John shrugged his shoulders, a gesture Zira had come to recognize as meaning he accepted the risk. "I brought you something," he said, reaching into his pocket. He held out a small device that glowed with soft blue light. A data crystal from Earth. It contains music, books, art, everything about our world that I thought you might want to learn. Zira reached out with her long fingers, the extra joint allowing her to cradle the crystal delicately. This was treason by the laws of her people accepting human technology. But she could not refuse this precious gift. "The first time I saw you save those children during the storm, I knew your people were wrong about humans," she said, her skin rippling with pink patterns of affection, a reaction she could not control around him. "You risked everything for strangers." John looked at the ground for a moment, another human gesture that intrigued Zira. "Anyone would have done the same," he said. "No," she replied, "they would not. The Kaldore would have calculated acceptable losses. We are taught that sentiment leads to weakness, but I have watched your kind. You grow stronger through your connections, not weaker." They walked together through the bioluminescent plants of the garden, speaking quietly about their worlds. John told her of Earth, of oceans and mountains, things Zira could barely imagine on her desert planet, while she explained the complex caste system of her society and why she as a scientist had more freedom than most to move between worlds. A distant alarm sounded, making them both tense. "Patrol drones," John whispered. Zira pulled him deeper into the foliage, her superior night vision allowing her to navigate the dense growth. The crystal clutched tightly in her hand. This gift meant more than John could know. It was proof that another way was possible. They reached a small clearing where Zira had hidden an ancient transport pod, one she had secretly repaired over many cycles. Its technology predating the war between their species. "We don't have much time," she said quickly. "The council suspects me after I questioned the historical records. They claim humans attacked first, but I found evidence suggesting it was a misunderstanding on both sides." John touched her arm, his warm skin against her cooler flesh, sending ripples of blue across her entire body. A reaction that would immediately reveal her feelings to any of her kind. "Lucy from my team thinks the same. She found old transmission logs that show your people tried to warn ours about the solar flares we mistook it as a threat." Zira had met Lucy briefly during a sanctioned scientific exchange. The human woman had shown her kindness even when other humans kept their distance. Lucy had shared water with her, a sacred gesture on Zira's drought-prone world. Zira activated the pod, its ancient systems humming to life. "We have 6 planetary cycles before they discover it missing," she explained, showing John the navigation system. "We can reach the neutral zone where both our kinds are studying the ancient ruins." John hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "We could present our findings together, prove that the war was based on errors, not malice. Lucy can help gather evidence from our side, and maybe, just maybe, we can end 1,000 years of hatred." Zira felt her skin glow with hope, a bright yellow that illuminated the pod around them. "I was raised to believe humans were our enemy," she said softly, "but you showed me We are not so different. The sound of patrol drones grew closer, their mechanical whirring. Cutting through the night air, John quickly entered the pod and Zira sealed the entrance. The ancient technology responding to her genetic signature, as all Kaldori tech dides. They rose silently above the garden. Zira saw her home city spread out. Below its spiraling towers and geometric precision so different from the chaotic but beautiful human settlements she had glimpsed in forbidden recordings, the contrast represented everything about their two-species order versus passion logic versus emotion we have 6 days before we're missed. John said, checking the small translator device all human representatives wore for diplomatic functions. That's enough time to reach the ruins and find proof. Zira programmed the final coordinates feeling, something she had never experienced before in her 200 years of life. True purpose beyond the assigned function of her caste. Something humans called freedom. The pod accelerated smoothly toward the stars. Zira watched her world grow smaller. Below them, her 4 eyes able to process the view in ways John's could not. She saw beauty in both their differences and similarities. John studied the data crystal in his hand. Our best hope is finding the translation key in the ruins, he said. Our linguists believe both our languages evolved from the same source. The builders who left the ruins across this system. Zira nodded, remembering the ancient symbols that matched on artifacts from both their worlds. Symbols neither species had fully deciphered. If we combine our knowledge, she said, we might unlock secrets both our kinds have sought for generations. The pod entered the upper atmosphere, and Zira felt the familiar sensation of leaving her world behind. But this time it was different. This time she was not alone. This time she carried hope for both their species. John looked at the stars spreading out before them, his expression filled with what humans called wonder. Another concept Zira was just beginning to understand through him. When I was a child, he said softly, I dreamed of the stars, but I never imagined finding someone among them who would change everything. I believed. Zira's skin rippled with deep purple, the color of profound emotion among her kind. The elders teach that humans are ruled by their hearts, not their minds, she said. They consider it your greatest weakness, but I have come to see it as your greatest strength. The ancient pod carried them toward the neutral zone, toward ruins that might contain the truth about their shared history, toward a future neither of their worlds had imagined possible. 2 beings from worlds at war, finding common ground among the stars, and as planet Eridu faded behind them, Zira knew with certainty that whatever dangers waited ahead, they would face them together. Proof that even the deepest divisions could be bridged by understanding, by courage, and by what humans called love. The journey to the neutral zone took 3 planetary rotations, during which Zira taught John about Kaldori history, their rise from nomadic tribes in the harsh deserts to masters of biotechnology. Their bodies evolved to withstand the intense radiation of their sun, with multiple layers of skin that changed colors with emotion and health. John in turn shared stories of Earth, its many cultures and varied landscapes so different from the uniform society. Zira knew he showed her images stored in the data crystal beaches with endless water forests, teeming with life mountains. Reaching toward the sky, Zira was particularly fascinated by human art, the way they captured emotion through color and form. Humans expressed themselves so openly while her people kept their true feelings hidden. She wondered if that was why humans had advanced so quickly in some ways while the Kaldore remained static. Your kind feels everything so deeply, she observed as John played music for her. The sounds unlike anything in Kaldore culture, which focused on mathematical precision rather than emotional expression. John smiled, a gesture Zira found herself trying to imitate in private, though her facial structure made it impossible. Maybe that's why we fight so hard, he said, for what we love. On the 4th day, the ancient pod began to show signs of strain. The technology far older than Zira had realized. Warning lights flickered across the control panel as they approached the asteroid field that marked the boundary of the neutral zone. John studied the readouts with concern. Can we make it through? He asked. Zira adjusted several controls, her long fingers moving with practiced precision. I think so, she answered. But we will need to conserve power. They dimmed all non-essential systems. The pod growing cold as the environmental controls reduced to minimum function. Zira could survive the lower temperatures her species adapted to the extreme conditions of her world. But she noticed John beginning to shiver. The asteroid field loomed. Ahead of them, a natural barrier that had kept the neutral zone isolated for centuries. Most modern ships avoided it completely, preferring the longer but safer route around its borders. The ancient ruins remained largely unexplored because of this. Difficulty in accessing them. Zira guided the pod with skill. But the strain on the ancient engines grew with each passing moment. They need to find a place to land and make repairs soon, or they would be stranded. A massive asteroid appeared ahead. Of them nearly twice the size of the pod, its surface covered with unusual geometric patterns that Zira recognized immediately. Builder technology, she whispered with reverence. John leaned forward, studying the markings. Those look like the symbols from the artifacts on both our worlds. Zira nodded, feeling a surge of excitement despite the danger. This could be what we are looking for. A builder outpost, maybe even a way station. She directed the failing pod toward the asteroid, looking for a suitable landing site. The ancient engines sputtering alarmingly as they approached. Suddenly a section of the asteroid surface shifted, revealing an opening just large enough to accommodate their vessel. A docking bay, John said with awe. It's still functional. After all this time, the pod slipped into the opening, lights automatically activating along the walls as they entered, revealing a vast chamber filled with similar pods, most in various states of disrepair. They had found a builder hangar as the pod settled onto the platform with a final whine of its engines. The artificial gravity and atmosphere of the hangar surrounded them. According to Zira's instruments, the air was breathable for both species. They cautiously exited the pod. Zira had to duck to avoid hitting her head on the ceiling, designed for beings apparently shorter than the Caldori. The hangar extended farther than they could see, with hundreds of docking bays, most empty, but some containing vessels of designs neither of them recognized. John touched the wall nearest him, the surface responding with a soft glow to his contact look. He said, pointing to symbols that began to appear above his hand. Zira moved closer, her four eyes widening with surprise. The symbols matched those on the data crystal and on artifacts from both their worlds. The wall was responding to John, reacting to his touch in a way it had not to her. "It's a directory," John said, excitement clear in his voice. The builders left instructions. Zira placed her hand beside his, and new symbols appeared, overlapping with the first set. "These must be the same words, but in the Caldori ancestral language," she said. "The builders knew both our species. They left this for us to find." They followed the glowing path that appeared on the floor, leading them deeper into the asteroid facility, down corridors that lit up as they approached and darkened behind them, as though the entire structure was conserving energy, the same way their pod had been forced. The path ended at a circular chamber with a raised platform in its center. Symbols covered the walls, flowing and shifting as though alive. Zira recognized some from ancient Caldori texts, while John pointed out others that appeared in early human writings. "This is it," John said softly, his voice filled with wonder. "The translation chamber. The builders left this so our people could communicate." Zira stepped onto the platform, motioning for John to join her as they stood together in the center. The symbols on the walls began to move faster, spinning around them like a whirlwind of light. Gradually, the separate writing systems began to merge, symbols from both languages finding their counterparts, combining into new forms that somehow both could understand. A message formed in the air before them, not in words but in concepts and images that bypassed language entirely, showing the history of both their species, how they had been seeded on their respective worlds by the same builders. As part of a grand experiment, the Caldori, designed to survive harsh conditions, evolving heightened senses and analytical minds, while humans were given adaptability, creativity, and emotional depth. Two approaches to intelligence, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. Then came the revelation that changed everything. The war between their species had not been a misunderstanding as they had suspected, but a deliberate test orchestrated by the builders themselves, who had manipulated both sides, feeding false information, pushing them into conflict. For 1,000 years, the builders had watched as humans and Caldori fought, sacrificing millions of lives in a war that need never have happened. John staggered back from the platform, his face showing an emotion Zira recognized as horror. "They used us," he whispered, "like laboratory animals. Zira felt her skin darken with anger, a deep crimson spreading across her body. Why, she demanded of the shifting symbols. Why do this to us, new? Images formed showing a third species, beautiful but terrible beings of pure energy, who had conquered thousands of worlds across the galaxy. The Builder's greatest enemy. The reason for their experiments. The beings they called the Devourers. The Builders had seeded hundreds of worlds with different species, searching for the perfect combination of traits that could resist the Devourers. They had failed 100 times, their created species destroying themselves or stagnating, but humans and Kaldore had survived against all odds. A final image appeared, a map of the galaxy with a pulsing light at its edge, moving slowly but inexorably toward their worlds. The Devourers were coming. The message was clear. Only together could humans and Kaldore hope to survive Zira. And John stood in silence as the symbols faded, leaving them in the dimly lit chamber, the weight of history and future pressing down on them. So it was all a test. John said, his voice hollow. We killed each other for centuries, because immortal beings wanted to see if we'd make good soldiers. Zira moved closer to him, her anger giving way to determination. Does it matter? She asked. We found the truth. Now we know what we face, and we know neither of us can face it alone. John looked up at her, his expression shifting. My people won't believe this, he said. They will think it's Kaldori propaganda. A trick nor will mine. Zira admitted they are too set in their beliefs, too convinced of human inferiority. But she touched the data. Crystal still in John's pocket. We have proof now, the Builder language, the history, the warning. If we can bring this back, translate it properly. Something shifted in John's expression, a hardening that Zira recognized as human resolve. Then we better fix the pod, he said, and get this information back to people who will listen on both our worlds. They returned to the hangar with new purpose, examining their damaged vessel. The ancient technology was beyond their ability to fully repair, but the hangar contained parts from other pods that might be compatible. As they worked side by side, salvaging what they needed, John spoke of his world of people who might listen to their discovery. A human named Alan, who led scientific expeditions. A woman, called Kate, who advised human leadership on Kaldore affairs. Zira told him of potential allies among her own kind. A rogue scientist called Trez, who had always questioned the war. A young council member named Vita, who sought reform of the rigid caste system. Together they formed a plan, not just to return with their discovery, but to build a coalition that might unite their species against the coming threat. After 3 days of work, they managed to repair the pod enough for the journey home, replacing damaged components. With parts salvaged from the hangar, they loaded as much Builder technology as they could carry, including data cores that might contain more information about the Devourers. The discovery weighed heavily on both of them, changing their perspective on the 1,000-year conflict between their species. All those deaths, all that hatred manufactured by beings who saw them as little more than weapons to be forged through conflict. As they prepared to leave the asteroid facility, John received an unexpected signal on his communication device. His team on the human research base was looking for him. Zira felt fear grip her heart. I can't be discovered with you, she said, her skin paling to a light lavender. The council will execute me without trial. John nodded grimly. Packing the last of the Builder artifacts, we need to split up, he said, his voice tight with emotion. It might be the only way to convince both our peoples of the truth. One messenger to each world. The plan made sense logically, but Zira found herself resisting it on an emotional level, something she would have considered weakness before meeting John. The thought of returning to her world without him left a hollow feeling in her chest. If we take separate pods from the hangar, John continued, we can each return to our own people with evidence of the Builder's manipulation. We can build support separately, then meet again. They found another pod in better condition than their original one, its systems more intact. They transferred half the Builder technology to each vessel, ensuring both species would have access to the same information. The moment of parting came too quickly. Zira stood beside her pod while John prepared his own. Neither seemed to know what to say. The bond between them transcended their biological differences. Yet now they would return to worlds where such a connection was forbidden. John finally broke the silence, reaching out to touch her arm. "How will I find you again?" he asked. Zira pressed something into his hand, a small crystalline device the shape of a six-pointed star. "It will lead you to me," she said. "When the time is right, when you have convinced enough of your kind it contains my genetic signature. The Kaldori use it to track one another." John closed his fingers around the crystal. "I will find you," he promised, "and I will bring allies." Zira felt her skin ripple with blue. "The Kaldori color of hope and affection. Our peoples have been manipulated into hating each other for 1,000 years, she said softly. "But in just a few days, you taught me that something else is possible." John stepped closer, looking up at her tall form. "In the Builder language, there is a symbol that appears when our writing systems merge," he said, "one that has no direct translation in either of our languages, but I think it means connection across difference." Zira nodded. The same symbol had caught her attention as well. "I believe my people once had a word for it," she said, "but we lost it during the war." John smiled, that sad, beautiful human expression that had first fascinated her. "We have a word for it," he said, "in my language. We call it love." Before Zira could respond, alarms sounded throughout the facility. The motion sensors they had activated detecting new arrivals. Ships were approaching the asteroid. Multiple vessels, according to the readouts. They ran to a view screen at the edge of the hangar, watching as 6 ships entered the field. 3 bearing Kaldore markings and 3 with human insignia. "They found us," John said, his face grim. "They must have tracked our original pod." Zira studied the approaching vessels, her superior eyesight allowing her to identify them. Patrol ships from both sides, heavily armed. Neither species trusted the other enough to investigate alone. "We have minutes before they dock," she said, turning to John. "You have to leave now. Take what we found. Spread the truth." John hesitated, his eyes fixed on hers. "They won't believe one human or one Kaldore," he argued. "They will think we were deceived or brainwashed." Zira knew he was right. The evidence they carried would be classified, buried by leaders who had built their power on hatred of the other. Her mind raced, searching for a solution. "What if we don't run?" she said slowly. "What if we stay, face them together?" John looked at her with surprise. "What are you suggesting?" "We show them the chamber," Zira explained, her skin brightening with excitement. "The translation room where the builders reveal their manipulation, both sides at once. If they see it together, experience the truth as we did." The risk was enormous. Both of them would likely be arrested, possibly executed before they could explain. But the potential reward, their species united against the true threat, the Devourers, was worth any personal cost. John nodded, his expression resolute. "I trust you," he said simply. They abandoned their escape plans. Instead, Zira accessed the builder controls using what she had learned during their days in the facility. She opened all hangar doors, sending an invitation to both approaching fleets. They waited in the translation chamber, standing together on the central platform as footsteps approached from both directions, human and Kaldori soldiers entering simultaneously. Weapons raised each side, believing they were rescuing one of their own. From the enemy, Zira recognized the Kaldori commander, Nava, the eldest daughter of a High Council member. Her 4 eyes cold with hatred as she looked at John, her skin dark gray with aggression. The human forces were led by a tall woman with auburn hair and a stern expression. "Stop right there," she called. To John, her weapon trained on Zira. "You are in violation of treaty boundaries." "Stevens," John stepped forward, slightly shielding Zira with his body. "Captain Kimberly, please lower your weapons," he said, speaking to the human leader. "There is something you both need to see." Nava snarled in the Kaldore language, which Zira's translator rendered for John. "The human has corrupted her mind. She will be purified upon return." Zira stood tall, her royal caste markings glowing on her skin as she addressed Nava in their shared language. "Commander, I have not been corrupted. I have been enlightened, as will you be if you simply observe." Neither side lowered their weapons, but neither fired, a fact Zira took as a positive sign. She slowly raised her hand to the builder controls, activating the sequence she and John had discovered. The symbols began to swirl around them, just as before, the walls of the chamber glowing with increasing intensity as the history of both species, their manipulation by the builders, and the warning about the Devourers played out for all to witness. Zira watched the faces of the soldiers as understanding dawned expressions of shock, disbelief, and in some cases anger, replacing the hatred and suspicion human and Calderay alike stood transfixed as centuries of propaganda unraveled before their eyes. When the presentation ended, Captain Kimberly was the first to lower her weapon, her face pale. "Is this verified?" she asked John, her voice unsteady. John nodded. "We spent days here studying the builder language, the artifacts, the history. It's all true. We were never meant to be enemies." Nava approached Zira, her skin now showing patterns of confusion and uncertainty. "The builders created us to fight together, not each other," she said, as if testing the truth of the words on her tongue. Zira reached out, placing a hand on Nava's shoulder, the gesture shocking the commander. "If we continue to fight each other, we will be defenseless when the devourers arrive," she said softly. "We need each other now more than ever." The soldiers from both sides looked at one another, centuries of conditioning, battling with the truth they had just witnessed. Many still kept their distance, hands hovering near weapons, but others, particularly the younger ones, began to show curiosity. A young human soldier stepped forward, hesitantly asking a Caldoray counterpart about the strange markings on her armor, while a Caldoray scientist cautiously approached the human captain with questions about their translation technology. It was a small beginning, fragile and uncertain, but as Zira stood beside John, watching the first tentative interactions between their peoples, she felt a surge of hope. Perhaps they had a chance after all. The journey ahead would not be easy. Centuries of hatred could not be erased in a single moment. The leadership of both worlds would resist the loss of an enemy that had defined their societies for generations. But now they had witnesses from both sides, people who had seen the truth with their own eyes. Captain Kimberly approached them, her expression serious. "I cannot promise how our government will respond to this," she said, "but I give you my word. I will fight to make them listen." Nava joined them, her skin, now, showing the deep blue of profound thought. "My standing with the council will allow us to be heard," she said. "But we will face resistance. Many built their power on this conflict." The return journey was tense, both human and Calderay ships traveling together for the first time in centuries, maintaining an uneasy peace as they carried the builder artifacts and data cores back to a neutral meeting point on the small moon that orbited between their worlds. Zira and John were kept separated during the journey, each debriefed extensively by their own kind. Zira faced hours of questioning from Nava and the other commanders. Her loyalty, her sanity, her judgment all called into doubt. She answered with patience, explaining again and again what she and John had discovered in the builder facility. 3 days after their return, they were permitted to meet again under close observation at the newly established Joint Research Base on the Moon. John looked tired, his face showing the strain of similar interrogations, but his eyes lit up when he saw Zira. They embraced briefly, causing murmurs of disapproval from the Caldoray guards, but Nava silenced them with a gesture. The commander had been changed by what she witnessed in the translation chamber, her former hatred replaced by cautious curiosity. "We have made progress," John told Zira, keeping his voice low. "Our scientists have begun decoding the data cores. They confirm everything we learned about the builders and the devourers." Zira nodded, her skin shifting to a hopeful yellow. "The High Council has agreed to receive the evidence, though they remain skeptical. Their pride makes it difficult to accept they were manipulated around them." Humans and Caldoray worked in separate groups, occasionally exchanging findings with formal stiffness. Centuries of conditioning not easily overcome, but Zira noticed small changes, subtle signs of warming relations, a human offering water to a Caldoray researcher, a gesture that held special significance in Zira's culture, a Caldoray scientist helping a human colleague adjust equipment designed for larger hand. Captain Kimberly approached them, her expression serious. "We have a problem," she said quietly. "The data cores indicate the devourers are closer than we initially believed. They have already reached the outer systems of this galaxy." Zira felt her hearts race with alarm. "How long?" she asked. Kimberly glanced at the nearest terminal. "Perhaps 20 Earth years, maybe less. Our scientists are still calculating based on their rate of advancement. A generation," John murmured, "barely enough time to prepare if we can unite our species." If being the critical word Zira thought she had seen, the resistance on both sides, the skepticism, The dismissal of their evidence as forgery or misunderstanding their story might be compelling, but centuries of hatred could not be undone in days or even months. We need something more concrete than ancient warnings. John said something that will convince both our governments of the immediate threat. Zira considered this. Her scientific mind working through possibilities. The Devourers consume energy. He said according to the Builder records they absorb it from stars, planets, even living beings. They leave dead worlds in their wake. Kimberly nodded grimly. That fits with our analysis of the data cores. They operate almost like a virus on a galactic scale. Perhaps we could detect their approach. Zira suggested if they consume energy on such a scale, there must be evidence observable patterns of stellar dimming, unusual radiation signatures. John looked at her with growing excitement. A survey. We could launch a joint mission to the edge of our solar system, establish monitoring stations, look for signs of their approach. Hard evidence that neither government could ignore. The plan took shape quickly. A small team of the most open-minded scientists from both species would travel to the outer boundary of their shared solar system to establish an early warning network. The mission would serve two purposes: gathering evidence of the approaching threat and forcing humans and Kaldorei to work together in close quarters for an extended period. Zira and John would lead the expedition, their unique bond and experience with the Builder technology, making them the logical choice, despite objections from conservative elements on both sides who still considered cross-species cooperation dangerous or sacrilegious. The preparations moved with surprising speed, the shared threat lending urgency to their work. Within weeks, a ship was ready. A hybrid vessel combining the best technology from both worlds. Kaldorei bioengineering melded with human mechanical innovation, creating something entirely new. The night before their departure, Zira found John alone on the observation deck of the lunar base, staring out at the stars, his expression thoughtful. "What troubles you?" she asked, joining him at the viewport. John sighed, a human gesture she had come to recognize as expressing complex emotions. "Our governments are cooperating on this mission, but I worry it's too little too late," he said. "Military leaders on both sides are still arguing for caution, suspicion, even continued separation." Zira understood his concern. She had witnessed similar resistance among her own people. The Kaldorei valued order, stability, tradition. Rapid change threatened the very foundation of their society. "If we succeed, if we find evidence of the Devourers that even the most stubborn cannot deny, what then?" she asked. "Will it be enough to truly unite us?" John turned to her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "I believe it will have to be," he said, "because the alternative is extinction." The expedition launched 2 days later, a crew of 12, 6 humans and 6 Kaldorei, chosen for their expertise and their willingness to work together. The journey to the outer solar system would take 3 months, during which they would live and work in closer proximity than their species had experienced in a millennium. The first weeks were awkward, each species keeping largely to themselves, eating separately, sleeping in segregated quarters, communicating only when necessary for the mission. Cultural taboos and ingrained prejudices created invisible barriers that neither side seemed eager to cross. Zira and John led by example, sharing meals, discussing ideas, openly showing that collaboration was possible. The most dramatic moment came when the ship's environmental system malfunctioned, creating temperatures too cold for the humans, but comfortable for the Kaldorei. Without hesitation, Zira and her team modified their own quarters to accommodate the human crew, sharing their living space while repairs were made, the simple act of hospitality, breaking down barriers that formal diplomacy could not. By the second month, the crew had begun to form genuine bonds. Human scientist Amber, teaching Kaldorei. Biologist Kettle about Earth music in exchange for lessons in Kaldorei. Mathematical theory engineer Max working alongside Kaldorei. Technician Vala to improve the ship's propulsion system. Their different approaches creating innovations neither would have discovered alone. Zira observed these developments with growing hope. Perhaps this small group could become a model for their worlds. A proof that cooperation was not only possible, but beneficial. They reached the edge of the solar system in the early days of the 3rd month, deploying sophisticated sensor arrays designed to detect the energy patterns associated with the Devourers. Initial readings showed nothing unusual, a fact that brought temporary relief, but Zira knew the threat remained. the builders warning too specific, too detailed to dismiss on the 47th day of their mission. The sensors detected something, a subtle disturbance in the background radiation of space almost too faint to measure. John was the first to notice the anomaly, calling the team together to analyze the findings. It matches the builder descriptions. Zira confirmed, her 4 eyes focused on the data streams. The energy signature of the devourers at extreme distance. The team worked feverishly to verify the readings, calibrating and recalibrating their instruments, eliminating other possible explanations, until they were certain the devourers were real. They were coming, and they would reach the shared solar system of humans and Kaldore within 15 years. We have our evidence, John said, his voice solemn. Now we need to make both our worlds believe it. They prepared their report, meticulously documenting every reading, every calculation, every correlation with the builder records. The case they built was scientific, objective, and undeniable proof that would convince even the most skeptical leaders. As they prepared to return home, Zira found John again on the observation deck, his eyes fixed on the distant stars where the invisible threat lurked. "What are you thinking?" she asked. John turned to her. His expression resolute. 15 years, he said, to prepare for an enemy that has destroyed countless civilizations technologically superior to our own. The return journey to the inner solar system was faster than their outbound trip. The ship's engines modified by the combined efforts of human and Kaldori engineers, a small but significant example of what their species could accomplish together. As they approached the lunar base, Zira noticed unusual activity. Multiple ships in orbit around the moon, far more than had been present when they departed. The communications officer, a Kaldori named Trell, reported increased transmissions between human and Kaldori vessels. "Something has changed," John observed, standing beside Zira on the bridge. They docked at the lunar station to find it transformed. What had been a small research outpost now bustled with activity, humans and Kaldori moving with purpose, some even working side by side without the awkwardness that had been present before. Captain Kimberly met them at the airlock, her face showing signs of exhaustion but also excitement. "While you were gone," she said, "we received transmissions. From the outer colonies, both human and Kaldori settlements reported unusual stellar activity, precisely matching the builder descriptions of devourer activity." Zira felt her heart skip a beat. The threat was manifesting sooner than they had anticipated. "It's happening faster than the models predicted," John said, his voice tight with concern. Kimberly nodded. "They hit an uncharted system 6 light-years from here. A Kaldori mining colony detected the approach and managed to transmit data before all contact was lost. The system star showed rapid energy depletion. Before going dark, news of the lost colony had accelerated cooperation between their worlds, fear proving a powerful motivator for change. The lunar base had been expanded into a joint command center where military and scientific leaders from both species coordinated their response to the approaching threat. Zira and John's expedition data provided the final proof needed to convince the remaining skeptics within hours of their return. They were summoned to a joint council meeting, the highest leaders of both worlds gathering to hear their findings. The council chamber reflected the still uneasy alliance between their species. The room divided, with humans seated on one side, Kaldore on the other, a physical manifestation of the psychological barrier that remained despite their common danger. Zira and John were positioned in the center, the literal and figurative bridge between their kinds. Zira presented the scientific data, her calm, measured delivery contrasting with the gravity of her message. The devourers were real. They were coming, and conventional weapons would likely prove useless against them. Entities that could consume the energy of stars would hardly notice nuclear weapons or Kaldori biowarfare. John followed with the tactical assessment: the devourers would reach their shared solar system within 15 years, possibly sooner. Based on the new data from the lost colony, they would need to develop new technologies, new strategies, new ways of thinking to have any chance of survival. As they spoke, Zira noticed the expressions of the leaders changing, the humans showing fear and determination in equal measure, while the Kaldori leaders' skin shifted through patterns of alarm analysis and finally resolved different reactions reflecting their different biological nature. But the core response, the same recognition of existential threat. The High Elder of the Kaldori Council rose after they finished, his ancient, skin deep purple with solemnity. For 1,000 years he spoke, his translator, converting his words to human language. We have defined ourselves by our hatred of humans. We believed they attacked us without provocation. We were wrong. Murmur ran through the chamber, such an admission unprecedented from the proud Kaldori leadership. The human president stood as well, matching the elder's gesture. Our history books taught us that the Kaldori struck first, that they were incapable of peace. That they saw us only as primitive animals to be eliminated. We were wrong as well. The two leaders approached each other, meeting in the center of the chamber, where Zira and John stood in a symbolic gesture that would have been unthinkable months earlier. They clasped hands, the human president looking up at the towering Kaldori elder. We propose a formal alliance. The elder announced not merely cooperation, but true union of our species, our knowledge, our technology, our strengths, to face this threat. Together as the builders intended, the chamber erupted with voices, some in support, others raising objections. Centuries of hatred not easily set aside. Even in the face of extinction, the debate continued for hours as both sides raised concerns practical and philosophical about how such an alliance would function. Zira and John remained at the center of it all, answering questions, addressing fears, offering the example of their expedition crew as proof that humans and Kaldori could not only work together but could achieve things neither species could accomplish alone. When the final vote came, the alliance was approved, not unanimously, but with sufficient support to proceed immediately. Joint military exercises would begin, shared technology, development, research into the builder artifacts, all directed toward a single goal: survival. In the days that followed, Zira found herself appointed to lead the scientific division of the alliance, overseeing teams of human and Kaldori researchers, working to understand the Devourers and develop weapons against them. John was assigned to the strategic command, translating their findings into practical defense plans. They worked separately more often than together, their unique abilities needed in different areas. But they found moments together, brief interludes in the frantic preparation for war. Own evening. 3 months after the alliance was formalized, they stood together on the observation platform of the new Joint Fleet headquarters, watching as the first truly hybrid vessel prepared for launch, a massive ship designed from the beginning for both species, with sections adapted to each biology, but interconnected in ways that encouraged interaction. It's beautiful, John said softly, the ship gleaming in the light of the rising earth. Zira nodded, feeling a complex emotion that her people had no name for, part pride, part hope, part fear. For the future, we have accomplished so much in so little time, she said, only the beginning. John replied, we have 12 years to prepare. Assuming the Devourers maintain their current trajectory, 12 years to overcome 1,000 years of hatred and mistrust. Zira turned to him, her 4 eyes studying his face with the intensity unique to her species. I have been researching human customs, she said carefully. There is a practice among your kind, a formal recognition of connection between individuals. John looked at her with surprise. You mean marriage? Zira nodded, her skin rippling with patterns that revealed her nervousness. The Kaldori had similar customs, though more focused on practical alliance than emotional bonds. She had studied both, trying to find a way to bridge this gap, as they had bridged so many others. The builders showed us we were meant to complement each other. She continued, our different strengths, our different perspectives, creating something greater than either alone. In many ways, it is like the word you taught me. Love. John took her hand, his smaller fingers intertwining with her longer ones. Such unions are still controversial, he said. Many on both sides think our species should remain separate even while working together. Zira knew this, had heard the whispers, seen the disapproving looks from conservatives in both societies, but also noticed the growing number of humans and Kaldori who had formed friendships, working relationships, even romantic attachments, as the strict separation of their past broke down. If we are to face extinction, we should do so being true to what we believe, she said simply. I believe our differences are not obstacles but advantages. I believe what the builders intended before they manipulated us into conflict. I believe in us. John smiled, that expression that had first fascinated her so long ago in the Forbidden Garden. Then let us show them another way, he said. As we have from the beginning. Their union was the first formal joining of human and Kaldori, celebrated in a ceremony that blended traditions from both worlds. It faced opposition, criticism, even threats from those who clung to the old hatreds. But it also became a symbol of the new alliance, a living example of what could be achieved when ancient enemies recognized their common humanity, despite their different biology. In the years that followed, many such unions formed as the barriers between species gradually dissolved, not erasing their differences, but celebrating them, finding strength in diversity as they prepared for the greatest challenge their worlds had ever faced. The Devourers arrived 11 years later, a force of nature more than an enemy, consuming energy in patterns that defied conventional physics. The joint fleet met them at the edge of the solar system with weapons derived from builder technology and strategies developed by minds from both species working in concert. The battle lasted 7 days, the longest the Devourers had ever been delayed according to builder records, long enough for millions to evacuate to sanctuary worlds identified in the ancient data Zera, and John commanded the last defensive line, their ship holding position to cover the final evacuation vessels as the Devourers approached Earth and Eridu. They had known this moment might come, had prepared for it, had made their peace with it as the energy wave engulfed their ship. John turned to Zera, his eyes meeting all four of hers. Was it worth it? He asked. Everything we've done, knowing we could only delay, not prevent. Zera touched his face, her skin glowing with the deep purple of profound emotion. We gave our people a future, she said together. That was always the point of our journey.